Hi, my name is Reverend Craig Hoffman. I am a member of the coalition and currently serve as the coalition's treasurer. I have a decades-long history with the coalition, being introduced to it back in 1988 while I was a seminarian at Andover Newton Theological School. My first gathering was in Colorado. I did not know what to expect. I actually had to get the assistance of a classmate of mine to buy my plane ticket to get there so it wouldn't show up on my parents' credit card. So we had a story that if anybody asked, we were going camping that week when we were gone from the campus. So the coalition has been a very, very important part of my history and seeking ordination in the United Church of Christ, which is the church of my birth and nurture. And at that point in time, I didn't know what my future would hold for pursuing ordained ministry in the United Church of Christ. And the coalition became a lifeline for me and many others, both those in seminary at the time, those considering seminary, and those who were already practicing ministry in the church in its various settings. I grew up in rural Pennsylvania in the Penn Northeast Conference, and I had very, very limited access to anyone who identified as LGBT or Q. I sensed that I was gay, and the messages I was receiving from my local church, even though it was a UCC church and still is, was not an affirming message. And I went to seminary hesitantly because of this, but I also thought I will need to confront this in my life in a way that was healthy, and it was not going to be a healthy way back in Pennsylvania. So going to seminary was, I accredit it to saving my life, because growing up in Pennsylvania was not a good experience for a gay boy. And so my seminary setting really became a safe place for me to find others and to find the coalition. So going to the coalition gathering gave me exposure to people I had never met before who were living out their lives in various ways. Some were openly gay, some were closeted based on their settings. But the sense that we were on a quest for acceptance and affirmation together as a group, and strategized in ways that supported each other, and helped navigate the sometimes dangerous process of disclosing one's sexual orientation in a church setting back then. This was 1988, and we didn't have any open and affirming conferences at that point. So we had to know individuals in those conferences who were part of placement processes and safe individuals who could help guide and strategize with us how to find safe places to serve the church. Well, the Coalition Choir was certainly one of those. We gathered in Colorado in 1988 for the Coalition, and Don Conover, who was the choir director for that particular gathering, was very instrumental in providing us a spiritual direction during the choir experience itself. He was always so kind, and still is. He's still with us, thank God. And one of the mementos that he would give to us as choir members are little trinkets such as this. This was a little lapel pin that he gave to us, a little butterfly, as a memento to remind us of our time together. And the choir was so inspirational, in part because we were able to express ourselves with words of affirmation and acceptance that were as important for us to hear as for us to sing. And the Coalition Choir became a very key and important part of the gathering's life and viability. We all looked forward to going to the coalition gathering to participate in the choir, and it was always a popular event for us to take time to sing together. And then we would perform for the worship services and find community in the midst of singing together. Well, music has a universal quality, and not only the music itself, but the words that go with the music, and the kinds of anthems and songs that we learned and sang together had a message that was so needed and still is needed to be heard by those in the church and outside the church. One of the components that I think is successful in our experience and history is the coalition choir always had a presence at General Synod. Our gatherings included a pre-gathering at General Synod, or I should say a pre-Synod gathering, and we would practice our songs for the General Synod experience. In the beginning, we were limited to singing in the hallways and maybe in the exhibit hall near the booth or something like that. But over the course of time, we were invited not just to be along the margins, but also on stage at General Synod. And that was a momentous occasion when we were extended that invitation. And with great joy and great gusto, we sang for the General Synod and had been invited back to General Synod's worship services since. So that was a sign of great acceptance and movement by the majority of those at the General Synod. We experienced resistance more so in the beginning, and over the course of time it's lessened. But there was one General Synod when we stood up to sing, and there was a delegation that walked out of the assembly hall in protest of our presence on stage. So it was not without the struggle, but the music that we sang was of high quality, and the message itself was one of love and acceptance and affirmation, and really was one of unity and inclusion. And that was really what we were asking for the church to recognize our presence. We have always been a part of the church, and we wanted the church to recognize and value our participation, our full participation in the life of the church. And that was one step in that direction. Over the course of time, and structurally speaking, we are now literally at tables recognized as representatives from one of the historically underrepresented groups of the church. So not only have we been invited to have our voices heard on stage, but also in the decision making of the church itself at its General Synod. One of the roles that the coalition has played that's been very vital and instrumental in making change has been sponsoring resolutions to the General Synod. When I was a delegate in 1989, I was assigned to a resolution committee, and this committee was to talk and deliberate and present to the general plenary of this UCC, General Synod, a resolution that was deploring violence against gays and lesbians, and that was a language back then. And we crafted that language to present it to the floor of General Synod, and it passed overwhelmingly, of course. But lots of discussion about things that were not comfortable for many of us to hear. But the resolution passed, and resolutions are a piece of paper with a document or a document that has a statement, and sometimes resolutions are just seen as just that. They're a piece of paper that says something without any action. However, these kinds of things have a way of rippling out through the church. My being a delegate for the first time and being assigned randomly to this committee, and there were a number of us from the coalition who were on that committee just by chance or by providence, perhaps. I went to the microphone at General Synod. my first one, and I was trembling at the microphone as I spoke in support of this resolution. And in the moment, I decided to come out on the floor of General Synod. And I had not come out before to my delegation. And that was both liberating and extremely frightening. But one decision I have never regretted. It gave me a sense of openness and honesty, so I didn't have to hide anymore. And I knew that I had the backing of the coalition, because they were friends with me in that moment, who were going to give me the support I needed, regardless of the outcome of how the church would respond. Oh, yes, correct. Yeah. As a matter of fact, mailings that went out from the coalition often went out with no return address label on it, for fear that if someone happened to intercept mail that came from the coalition, there would be quote unquote guilt by association, and people's employment would be jeopardized in some instances. So it was a very different world back in that time, where much of the activities were cloaked in secrecy because of fear of what might be happening, what would happen if one were to be discovered to be a part of the LGBTQ community. Thankfully, that has changed for many, but not for all. We still experience settings in the church that are not safe, and folks are, there's a sense of caution in certain areas about whether or not it is safe for one to be out. But certainly more and more folks are being open about their own identities today, which is a great celebration of liberation. And when we are able to come out, we witness to those who may not know that they know someone who is from our community. And that furthers the conversation, hearts are transformed, and we move forward. The choir embodied our movement, both in our presence, our physical presence, and people who would walk by the choir as we sang could not help but be affected by the message that we were sharing, a message of love and acceptance and affirmation, and calling on the church to recognize our presence and provide for us safety to respond to our call to ministry. And it has, over the course of time, given encouragement to those who might otherwise discount us because we couldn't be ignored. Our voices could not be drowned out, or our faces could not be blurred, because we were right there in the halls of General Synod. And the messages resonated so much with the community that there was a recognition that our movement was a spirit-led movement, and we were not going to turn around. We were moving forward. Well, certainly I want to give a shout out to the members of the coalition who were leaders in serving as choir directors or accompanists with the choir director. There are three who come to my mind at the moment. Don Conover, who I mentioned earlier, was a key leader in our choir and continues to be so in his home church in Hawaii. And Rick Iramatagi, who was a contemporary of mine in seminary. He penned a song that really became, I think, an anthem for the coalition choir, the title being "Hear Our Voices." And I would hope that sometime in the near future we can have that text and music available to those who are interested, because it really is a profound message, very simply put, actually. And that's what makes it somewhat profound, is it's just a message of love, acceptance, and inclusion. And then the third person that I can recall is Elaine Kirkland, who also served as a choir director. So those are three individuals who were very patient with us and brought us great music, great messages for us to share with each other and to share with the church. And then I want to also acknowledge that since the Coalition Choir has been in existence for a number of decades, we are now losing some of those cherished members of the chorus, the choir. I'll name two in particular, Reverend Jan Griesinger, who served as one of the coordinators for the coalition in its early days, national coordinator. She, along with Sam Lolliger, both of them are no longer with us. They have joined the great cloud of witnesses. And also Alice O'Donovan was a faithful member of the choir. So I lift up those names of individuals who I know that their voices, even though they're not physically with us, they continue to ring out for justice and peace throughout the church as our choir continues to sing those words of affirmation, love, and acceptance. When I went to seminary back in 1986, I didn't even know that Open and Affirming churches existed. It was a very early movement at that time. And it turns out my home church back in Pennsylvania withdrew their support for my ordination candidacy. And while I was in seminary, I had become associated with Open and Affirming Church in Boston, Church of the Covenant. And when my local church back in Pennsylvania, which was the church of my birth and had family members back generations, when they decided not to support me for ordination, I knew exactly where I was going to go for the necessary support, and that was Church of the Covenant. And they welcomed me with open arms. And the coalition, because it was the birthplace of the Open and Affirming movement, has given me a place in the church, literally, when I needed it. The Church of the Covenant provided me with the necessary support, the Metropolitan Boston Association, despite letters of caution when I transferred membership to that church, that I was a troublemaker and I should be met with caution by the Metropolitan Association minister. The Metropolitan Boston Association recognized what homophobia looks like, and they supported me through my ordination process there. So the coalition had many ways of supporting me and my colleagues in ministry and those who were pursuing ordination and placement through various support networks that we had for example, a seminarian network, so that we knew what each seminary was doing to support the seminarians there. When I arrived at the campus of Andover Newton, there was an underground LGBT group. We only knew of it by word of mouth, and it always met off campus. By the time I graduated in 1990, there was a movement across seminarians that at graduations we carried a lavender colored flower, a carnation, as a symbol for anybody who supported the ordination of LGBTQ folks. So there were straight allies in my class who carried the lavender colored carnation. And there were many of us who made a statement during that graduation in 1990. And so we've made great strides in many ways, each one moving us ever so close to the promise of full inclusion and full participation. And the work continues. And that's why the coalition is so important to this generation and future generations, because we still have work to be done in churches that will not even consider a candidate who identifies as openly gay, lesbian, or transgender. And so until that day comes, the coalition's work continues, and we need support for that kind of work to happen. And the witness of the coalition is one that is spirit-led and is one that will be transforming the church now and for the future.